Torah, Tetzaveh, 162, bottom paragraph. Now, the Rabbi is explaining that Moshe Rabbeinu, he doesn't explain elaborate on Moshe Rabbeinu, but Aaron HaKohen is Shushvinidim Atrinusam. He is the one that brings, through lighting the menorah, he brings Or and Simcha into the Avodah. That's what he feeds the Jews with. Moshe Rabbeinu feeds them with Amunah, and Aaron HaKohen feeds them with Orah and Simcha. And he says that when you have the level of Simcha, like you said, davening is B'chai B'kashti, but when you have Simcha, so then you break all barriers, and because of that, you're able to bring down the Shekhinah down here. He says, the bottom paragraph of column 1. It says, but the kindling of the menorah was only done by added with pressed olive oil. You squeeze, you press the olive and put it into a basket. So when you squeeze olives, like Rashi brings out in this week's Parshat, there are different levels of olive. The virgin olive oil means the first drops. That's the only oil that's kosher for the menorah. Then you had other oils that they had in the base of Mikdash, like for the flour offerings and all that they had to put oil on. That would the later, not the initial virgin olive oil, the other olive oil. There are different levels of it.
How many times you could make that oil from olive?
No, I'm saying when you squeeze an olive, the first drops that come out is what's called virgin olive oil. And then, okay.
What about extra virgin?
That's before they squeeze it. An olive itself is bitter. The Gemara says, like it says, may my food be bitter like olives, but coming from Hashem, rather than having to rely on people. The Gemara says also, if you eat olives a lot, plain olives, the Gemara says you forget your learning of 70 years. But the Gemara says when you eat olive oil, it keeps you remembering for 70 years. So therefore it says in halacha, by the way, if you want to eat a lot of olives, put a little olive oil on the olive and then you neutralize it. That's what the halacha says. Anyway, that comes from the world of shikha mi'elam aklipos. We know that forgetfulness is evil. That's why we say in Rosh Hashanah davening, Ke'en shikha lefnei chisech veidecha. God doesn't forget. We have Malchi, Zechrenis, Shefris. Zechrenis, we tell Hashem to remember all the good things that happen. And we say, Ke'en shikha lefnei chisech veidecha. There is no forgetfulness by Hashem. Shikha comes in the world of klipa. And that's why when Moshe Rabbeinu died, they forgot 3,000 halachas. Because of the Kedusha that left when Moshe and the Snil ben Kanas revived them, whatever. But he says,
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. When Moshe died,
the Jews forgot 3,000 halachas. They forgot, and the Snil ben Kanas revived them. Okay. So what is zayis? It's interesting. You have the oil of the zayis, ends up to be the pure oil, shemen, which is you lit the menorah with it. We know in Chassidus says shemen is the secrets of Torah. Yet the origin of the oil comes from a zayis, which is bitter. It makes you forget your learning. Meaning the olive itself is in the world of klipa. And yet you squeeze it, you press it, you torture it until you get shemen. Hainu b'chinas chachma. Which we know shemen mishchas kodesh. Shemen is a level of chachma, and it says kamay mirazal, like the Gemara says, shem shazayis mashkach tamudish shalayin shanim. Just like eating olives makes you forget 70 years of learning. So the olive oil brings it back, the 70 years that you forgot. Why? Because Chachma is mechazikoring. Because Chachma is the level of memory. Because the Parshat Kodesh should remember that Chachma is alluded to in the level of zikaron. Uzikarim beinei nacha. Okay, so you have like this. The aleph is a level of klipa. Squeezing the olive oil gives the oil, which is a level of chachma. So what does it mean, pressing the olives, squeezing the olive? It represents the breaking of evil. What do you mean? You press yourself, so to speak, not to do what you want to do. You torture yourself to give in. That's called breaking evil. He makes himself like nothing. That level of bittul, that level of iskafia, breaks all the wills of evil. That he'll have no other will for himself. In other words, he works on himself that he has no more temptations of this world. And he won't even seek. Remember, like he was explained before, when a person realizes the accomplishment of doing mitzvahs, that you connect to the essence of Hashem, not the ray of Gan Eden, even the higher Gan Eden, you connect mamish to the essence. So then, like he said, why would a person want to do any of these temptations that are childish and animalistic and all that? And he says, he makes it that he doesn't even need them. In other words, like the poor man that said, I have everything I need. When the Maggid sent somebody came to the Maggid and said, Rebbe, I have nothing, how do I live with nothing? How can I handle it? He said, go to Zusha. He went to Reb Zusha, was, as they say, poor as a church mouse. Not in Beverly Hills, those mice are rich. Anyway, so he came to him and he said, what can I do for you? He said, the Maggid sent me, you should teach me how to live with nothing. He said, I don't understand my Rebbe, I have everything. I don't understand why he's sending you to me to learn how to live with nothing. I have everything, you have to go to somebody who has nothing. So he said, what does he need it for? And therefore, when a person has this level of squeezing of his kafia, he doesn't even want olam haba. Why should he get a ray if he can have like Dalton Rebbe? I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your olam haba, I want you.
But isn't that a level of a tzaddik though? What he's talking about, isn't that a level of a tzaddik?
Yeah, the problem is, not the problem. The difference is, the tzaddik has it 24/7. If we do this once or twice a year, it's pretty good. In other words, yes, it's aved of a tzaddik. We can't expect to be the aved of the level of the Alter Rebbe that says, I don't want you, I only want you. Yeah? We want a good steak, a good ice cream, you know what I mean? If it's together, a pot of ice cream. But every so often, a person could and should and must have this level. That they don't want all this worldly things. They want Hashem himself. And it says, Kamesha Kosav al Yeshedis, Yaakov Agoyim, like it says, Torim Yotchal Tzarecha. You will lift up your hand and your needs, and all your enemies will be cut off. Shebachin Shedis Yaakov, meaning, he makes himself like nothing, he elevates his hand, he cuts off the evil and elevates his hand over them in a level of miskel begrainum. To have the cheder pipi is beyodam, the double-edged sword like we learned yesterday. To elevate and have elukus dictate his life. If a person though is not bottled to Hashem, he doesn't only want what Hashem wants, he wants what he wants, then the Gemara says, Hashem says, I cannot coexist with this person. Because the Gemara in Saita says, an empty vessel you could put something into. A full vessel you can't put anything into. So Hashem said, if a guy is full of himself, how do you expect me to be there? There's no room. There's no room for me. Somebody is bittul, it's a different story. There's a beautiful word that I once heard, that even if a person's full, but there is always room for more. In other words, you can fill up, a teacher once told the class, fill up a bottle with rocks. A jar, yeah, good. A jar. And he says, is the jar full? Yeah, the rocks are all the way to the top. So he says, now take smaller pebbles and put it into the jar. All of a sudden, there was room for the smaller pebbles in between the holes. After that was full, he said, okay, now take sand and pour it into the jar. And there was still room. That means just because you're full of something doesn't mean that there's no room to grow and become more full. You might think you're full, but there's always room to improve. Like they say, the biggest room in the house is the room for improvement.
He likes that. He's an architect.
Yeah, okay. The Einer in Tzav Baruch Hashem is Gal El B'Misha Bottle. Hashem only rests in something that's bottled to him, which is a level of Chochmah, which is a level of Shemen. In other words, like this. Shemen is Chochmah, which is the level of Bittul. Chochmah is Bittul, Kayachma. So Shemen, so the Zayis, evil, the olive represents evil. Shikha, forgetfulness, bitter, all that. But when a person squeezes the olive and you get oil is a level of Chochmah, which is a level of Bittul. Meaning, what Al Rebbe is saying over here, when you suppress your evil, out comes a level of Bittul of Kedusha, which is the level of Shemen, which is the liquid that floats above everything. It's the essence of everything. Anything that you squeeze, the question of how much you have to squeeze it, you will get oily substance from it. Because the essence of everything is oil. Therefore, the Rabbi explains, the essence of Torah is the previous, this, not Kabbalah, which is Yayin, this is even higher, this is the level of Shemen.
It has to be only through squeezing, there's no other way?
Shofar. Burning also becomes small.
So it could be brought to
Kechut HaBarzel, the Jewish reward in the Mitzrayim.
Let's see.
They got the Torah.
Galut is
Can you
Geula.
state the difference between the first squeeze and the
Virgin olive oil.
late?
What am I, an oil manufacturer?
No, I know, but in
first
practice,
squeeze.
what you were saying,
In oil, when you squeeze it,
the little,
the first initial drops that come out are the purest.
right.
That's called virgin olive
And then
oil.
in practice,
Those are good. That's the only oil kosher for the lighting the menorah.
okay.
That's what it says, Shemen Zayis Zoch. Has to be pure, refined. Okay, then you have when you keep squeezing, more oil comes out. That's good for different things, like the flower offerings and different things. That's all. And he says, Ve'inarins of Sheirim is Gal El B'Mishabat, which is the level of Chochmah, which is Shemen that comes through the squeezing of the olive. Shemen Nimshech Acher Psila. So now what happens to the soil? When you light on the candle, the oil is drawn into the wick, right? The fire draws the oil into the wick. V'nichel v'niser ha'kel be'er ha'nechas b'psila shalei nish mimenu klum. That's total bittul. In other words, not only is Shemen itself the level of bittul, but when you squeeze the oil and you light it, the oil mamish becomes nothing. The wick, there's still a little bit left over wick, even when the fire is out. He said, Mashenkin apsila, nishik sasefer, there's still a little bit of remnants from the wick. V'kach b'chines ha'chochma. B'chines ha'bitl shabato v'nichlo mamish be'er ha'ner shel mitzvah zu, which is the total level of bitl. In the candle of mitzvah, li'ez gili earns a baruch hu mamish al nafshi. V'ayidei zeh, miskayim b'nafshi, that keeps in the nefesh. Earning to baruch hu ha'nimshach min ha'mitzvah, that comes from the mitzvah. In other words, like this. When a person does a mitzvah, they're actually, like it says, that's the level of Aron HaKayin, the light and simcha, which reveals that level of Kedusha within the neshama. That is the keli for Elokus to come down. If you do mitzvah without shemen, meaning, what happens when you do a mitzvah without bittul? I do it because I want to become popular or famous or whatever. He said, Masha Enkein. If there's no oil, meaning there's no bittul, you take a wick without oil and light the wick, it lasts for a second. And it stops in a second. So in other words, what is he saying over here? What does Aaron do? Aaron brings into mitzvah the light and the simcha, meaning the oil of the mitzvah. What is the oil of the mitzvah? The bittul that the Jew has to Hashem by doing a mitzvah. Meaning, a Jew tortures himself, i.e., instead of staying in bed, you get up and you come to daven, for instance, or any other mitzvah, you have to eat this and says, no, I'm not in the mood, or whatever, any mitzvah that it could be. So then, what happens when you break yourself, that's the squeezing of the oil, of the olive. You're squeezing the nefesh habamis, the bitterness of iskafia, you're breaking it, and then you create the shemen that's complete bittul. Not only is it bottled, it becomes completely bottled in the flame, it becomes consumed in the flame, it's totally, meaning it's connected completely to Hashem without anything left.
It's the first drop.
Well, by the minute it has to be Shem and Zayas. It has to be pure. You know, a guy, they tell a story, a guy was learning late at night, but he had the curtain drawn down, but he made a hole in the curtain. This is a true story. He made a hole in the curtain. Why? Because if the curtain was drawn, people wouldn't see that he's learning late at night. But if there was a curtain, and a hole in the curtain means people can still look in and see, that means not only that he didn't want anybody to know he's learning at night. And therefore he pulled down the shade. Nobody should see him learn. You understand what I mean? That learning is not bittul. That is not bittul learning. Okay? That's not, there's no shemen in that learning, so to speak. Shemen is the level of bittul, and that bittul becomes consumed in the flame. If the mitzvah is done without shemen, then it's not a permanent avodah. So what's the avodah of Aaron? The avodah of Aaron HaKohen is by kindling the menorah, is to reveal that level of shemen in every single yid.
Well, I thought Judaism judges people by their deeds, not by their intent.
Correct. If I intend to put on tefillin with all the Kabbalistic meanings, and I didn't put it on, I didn't get the mitzvah. But we're talking, when you want the mitzvah to be done properly, with bittul, with love and fear, right? You have a mitzvah, the body of a bird. But the bird is alive, but it can't fly. But what are the wings? There's a right wing and a left wing. You can't have only, a bird can only have one wing. Why did Hashem make two wings? Hashem could have made a bird fly with one wing. You know, like a helicopter, flies with the whatever. Yeah, why didn't Hashem? Because in Ruchnius, there's something called love and fear. Those are the two wings that make a mitzvah fly upward. So yes, if you do a mitzvah without love and fear, yes, did you do the mitzvah? You have the body of the bird. But did you have it did you make it fly up with bittul and everything else? No. So that's what, and he said, that's what Avedis Adam Benichas Hanedis. Va'alosam han mechina simcha shom mitzvah. He mechutza perechas so edus. Where did he light the menorah? The pasuk says, outside the perechas, meaning outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? There was a Kodesh HaKadoshim that had the Aron. Outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim was what's called the Kodesh, where they had the menorah, and the Mizbech HaPnimi, and the Shulchan. Shulchan, Mizbech HaPnimi that they brought to Keteris, and then the menorah. So the Torah says outside. So what does it mean in spiritual level? Outside the Perechis. So what's the Perechis? Then we can understand what it means outside the Perechis. V'inyan HaPerechis. Ki neksiv shemesh shemagin havaya lekim. It says that like the sun and its shield is the havaya and Elokim, shem havaya yichud ilah. What's the difference between havaya and Elokim? Havaya Elokeinu. Hashem hu Elokim. So Chassidus all over explains there's yichud ilah and yichud tatah. Higher level of unity and lower level. Right before the whole Shar Yichud, on top of, before the Alter Rebbe actually begins Shar Yichud V'Amunah, there's 2 lines that the Alter Rebbe wrote. Lahavin, to understand what is Shar Yichud V'Amunah, which talks about the Yichud of Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, that only God exists. It says that Lahavin Masha Kosev B'Zayar, to understand what it says in the Zayar, that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is Yichud Ilah, and Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leil Vod is Yichud Tata. And that's the whole Shar Yichud V'Amunah. What is Yichud Ilah? It's like Yichud Ilah means there is nothing but God. There is no world. Only Hashem exists. Yichud Tata means there's a world, but the world is batul to Hashem, to be continued.
What's the takeaway for today's lesson?
Be good.